Personally, my stance is about enabling student agency and going beyond engagement, trying to get kids to really be fully motivated in their learning and fully motivated around the purpose behind their learning, and try and answer the question as to why do I need to know where we're at and why do I need to know what I'm learning. So my personal journey, like I said when I briefly introduced myself, I am an early years teacher at heart. My full training was early years, and I am overwhelmed even now when I go into an early years setting and sit and observe students who lead their own learning and the whole awe and wonder behind how they make connections between areas of learning to fully embed their understanding of a new concept or their understanding of something that they've encountered. And I also am always in awe of those people that can ask the right questions or give the students the right thinking time to get that level of understanding and develop them further. And I think that's where my heart is, and my heart will always be with early years. But actually through my career, I've reflected on why it is early years that my heart belongs to, and actually why that has shaped some of where my own head is at around education. I started in a mainstream school, moved into another mainstream school as an early years leader at Green Top, and then developed into leadership and left there almost 2 years ago as head of Green Top, which at that point had been in the XP Trust for a couple of years, and I moved then into the leadership of XP and XP East. Now, going from primary to secondary is somewhat alien in some respects, I'm not going to lie. However, what I do like about the way our secondary schools model works is that our secondaries are primary schools for big kids in a lot of respects. So when I talk about our curriculum a little bit later on, hopefully that'll resonate a little bit. But also our primary schools, Green Top is the same size as XP and XP East together. So we are deliberately sized schools. We have 25 students in a class, 50 students in a year group. So there are only 500 students in total across the two schools. So you can see that actually scalability wise, they are very similar in the way they're led. And actually, through the trust model, we have very similar core practices that we stick to, and that is at the heart of everything we do. And so that allows us to then, has allowed me to transition from primary to secondary pretty seamlessly. So a lot of the learning that I've done, particularly around student agency and particularly around students leading their own learning, sits in the work of Ron Berger. Ron Berger writes a hell of a lot for EL education in America, and he very much puts at the heart of that, the students are empowered to lead their learning. They reflect on where they've come from, and there's a lot of tools in there of how to embrace leading our own learning. Lots of practical guides. So the yellow book there that's shared on the screen, it is a bit of a companion and how to deliver this as CPD. So we work through those books quite often in our setting and engage new starters with. Actually, critique is a really friendly way to give feedback and for students to have their voice around feedback and accept feedback around their work. So let's engage with critique through this book, and let's look at the different components and some of the videos and things that support Ron Berger's work to support us in how we lead. And then learning that last that's also there really makes us as educators think about how we deepen that instruction. So how do we allow students to grapple and collaborate and really question for themselves where they sit in terms of this learning, this new learning. And so that sort of is the leading our own learning extra, or leading our own learning plus, for want of a better phrase. And so if you wanted further reading, I would point you to particularly Leaders of Our Own Learning and Leaders That Last, Learning That Lasts, because they will embed some of the things that I've talked about tonight. So at XP, we talk a lot about how academic success is not the only measure of success of a student, and how actually we encourage children to develop in their character growth, beautiful work, and academic success in equal parts. And we talk about how actually preparing students for the modern world, we're not just preparing them to pass exams. And so in doing so, that really allows our students to embrace those softer skills that actually support them to be more tolerant, understand diversity and belonging, have a little bit more voice around student activism and how they can be positive social activists in their communities, and have a voice around how to improve their work for it to be the best work they can complete. And we also talk a lot about how, as adults, you're not always judged just by your academic success, but also who you are as a person and the quality of your work. So we encompass that within everything we do, from the age of 3 all the way up to the age of 16, and talk a lot with our students about how actually who you are as a person needs to be as beautiful as the level of work you produce and as the outcomes you produce from your standardised testing. So that's really at the heart of the work that we embark on. So predominantly how we're different, I suppose, to the typical mainstream schooling system is that we run on a bit of a blended approach. So EL Education is a education establishment over in America. They've got schools all across different states over there. I think they're in every state now. They've got a school. They are primarily built around the work of the Outward Bound Trust and Kurt Hahn, but also around some high standards work with Harvard University. And alongside that, we also look at the work of High Tech High, who are predominantly based around project-based learning. But obviously, in the UK, project-based learning is something that's toyed around with and played around with and banded around across lots of different, I suppose, audiences, as in not as ambitious as a lot of other ways of delivering education. We have spent a long time mapping our curriculum to enable our expeditionary curriculum to particularly produce products, but in a way that those projects have a lasting legacy on the children's learning, because they've had student agency around with the direction of that learning and their ownership of that. So hopefully over the next couple of slides, you'll be able to embrace that a little bit more. I've got a short film that I'm hoping plays. It did when we practiced a few minutes before we let people into the room, so fingers crossed it does, that I'd like us just to watch. And then there's a couple of things that I just want to articulate about crew particularly, and then we'll have a little break to talk, reflections and any questions that we've got, particularly around crew. And then I'll do the same around expeditions, and then hopefully that's giving you a bit of a whistle-stop tour as to what we do at XP that I feel really promotes student agency within the curriculum. But also, if you've got primary questions, please ask them, because as you know, I've got experience from both. So this should play when I press the next arrow.
Welcome to your school. Right, get on a bus, off, we're out to Outward Bound. We're taking them out of their comfort zone. We're taking them out of the environment they're aware of.
We're all in this together, and we are all in this together. It's not a platitude.
For us, in the Outward Bound trip, was to learn what real friendship is like and how to bond properly with teachers.
It's a very closely forged group of people with a purpose.
We support and challenge each other. That's what we do.
A cornerstone of the school's ethos is the concept of crew. This term for XP's tutor groups and the wider school body as a whole could easily be dismissed as a piece of educational rebranding. But at Doncaster, they believe that crew is at the heart of what makes the school so special.
We are crew. It means a lot. It means a lot to me now. It means a togetherness, I think, of teacher and students together.
We are crew means to me that everyone in the school and even out of school is family.
For me, crew means to be part of a team, that we're all on the same boat, all on the same page, and if someone falls behind, it's our responsibility to make sure that they are on the same level as us.
Coming from the culture and the ethos and the character traits and the habits of work and learning is the central idea of crew, that we're all in this together, and we are all in this together. It's not a platitude. We say to our kids, we're crew, not passengers.
Passengers, they're sitting back. They're not part of it. They're along for the ride. They might be enjoying themselves. They might be having a lovely time. But other people are giving them that lovely time. Other people are driving the train. Other people are deciding where it goes. but it's the crew that do the business. It's the crew that work hard. It's a very closely forged group of people with a purpose.
Good morning, crew. Good morning. Okay, I'd like to know how you're feeling today. So, turn to the person next to you, say good morning, say would you like a handshake, a high five or a hug, okay?
Good morning, Miss Robinson. Would you like a hug, a handshake or a high five?
I would like a high five because I've got lots of energy this morning. Woo!
Crew leaders meet with their crew every
Liam,
morning.
Good morning.
Crews are approximately 12 or 13 students, so they have specified time, 45 minutes a day, where we look at things like their personal well-being, we look at their academic progress and how those two things tie together. We read books together, we have fun together, and we talk to each other and get to know each other, because that's vitally important. If you are going to make any difference to young people's lives, is you've got to know who they are.
I think crew is all about sticking together, and if someone's like hurt or something, at least we've got someone on our back to like stick up for us, not just always by ourselves.
And it's so much more than a form class that I've had in other schools, because it's smaller and it's a lot more intense, and we have the time and the space to explore the relationships that we need to build, I think.
Okay, so to elaborate a little bit on what was in that film, like just to reiterate a few of the things, crew is 12 to 13 students, one crew leader. That crew leader stays together with that crew for the full 5-year journey at XP. Equally in primary school, they have an influential part of the crew's life from 3 all the way through to year 6. And so they develop strong and meaningful relationships. We do lots of, I suppose, looking back at Outward Bound. So week 1 is Outward Bound. We climb a mountain together. We find out as crew who are the kids in our crew that are going to struggle with that sort of thing, and how do we all empathise then, and how do we support one another to get to the top of that mountain. We'll sleep under the stars together, and we'll embark on the upset and the worry of some students, and how do we support each other to get through the night in that situation. And we do things that push children completely out of their comfort zones, but not to a point of panic. So we talk a lot about how actually this will be too much for some students, and we'll go as far as we possibly can, and we debrief after every opportunity throughout Outward Bound week to really unpick what we were feeling at that moment in time, and how that's developed us as a crew and developed us as each other, and to know each other. And in doing so, then we can reflect on that throughout their journey with us, and reflect on, actually, do you remember when it was really tough to climb a mountain? Well, actually, algebra is really tough in maths too, but we can solve this together, and let's think about how we can solve this together. Who are our superheroes around this within our session? Who are the people that find this natural and can coach us and support us to all achieving this lesson? And so that allows us then to develop that collaborative work and that emotional sort of attachment to learning through doing it together as crew. And I think it's really worth pointing out at this point that actually we don't have many outliers. So we've never permanently excluded a child at XP or XP East, which is very untypical for a Doncaster secondary school. And we currently serve 3 times the number of SEN students nationally. So we have 30% SEN and 6% EHCP in XP. Very similar numbers over at XP East. I think pupil premium slightly higher at XP East. So where the demographic dips slightly in certain groupings, it is higher in other groupings. And what we do find is we have the relationships through crew to empower students to use their voice. So in a community meeting, which was where we bring the whole school crew together, so all 250 students will sit on our stairs that you saw in the video, with all crew leaders supporting their crew. We will allow students to make stands or appreciate things that have gone off during their week. So an example of that was recently a student made a stand about year 11 children actually using racial language, and that was a year 7 student holding year 11 students to account. And then we unpick that as part of the community meeting and why we're making a stand collectively and why that's not okay. And so then the students that have made that stand know that they are supported by the community to hold that line, and that we all agree that that's not accepted in our community. And so collectively as community, they solve their own problems and police their own problems, obviously with some adult guidance from time to time with certain individuals, but the majority are very good at making a stand. And if we make a wrong mistake, which everyone makes mistakes, we won't expect students and staff to make apologies in a community meeting. Now, that might be in the safety of a crew community if it's a small error. If it's something that actually needs highlighting that's not acceptable for all, then that will be in the full community meeting, and they'll apologise and they'll make a pledge, and then community will hold them to account around that and support them to not repeat that offence, whatever that was, in terms of our policing of the work that we do. So for my next slide, it's just allowing you to have 2 minutes rather than listening to me to share reflections. Are there any notices or wonders you want to ask? And then we'll move on and we'll talk for maybe 10-15 minutes about Expedition and the way we sequence our curriculum.
I think I wonder more than anything, because we're a very small school at the moment, and obviously I'm really aspirational. I think something like that is amazing, because I think children supporting each other, holding each other account, just sounds incredible. And also when I did my teacher training things for the teachers last year, I did a lot of Tom Bennett with the 3 R's and all of that. But I think it's interesting to see how that would look when you're very limited on staffing. And you know, there's only 7 teachers, we've only got a handful of TAs. It's that optimism that I think sometimes people would think, oh, is it another thing? Or how do you make that work? And also we're in a very transient community because we've got loads of people coming and going. And even this year, my class have had, you know, numerous changes. So how does it look in that way?
So in primary, as we know, funding is slightly different in primary to secondary. So in primary, we say crews no bigger than 20 students. We think that's manageable, 20 students in a crew. And crews, we've trialled different things, I'm going to be honest. So we've had linear crews that go across phases, but we've also had crews within year groups. And for us, it's more about developing that time within the day. So we have 45 minutes, but at primary, that's often split into 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon as a debrief before they go home, because often the teacher's the same person, so they can obviously be part of that morning and afternoon session. We will circle up, and that'll be a ritual that we sort of follow. So whenever we're in crew sessions, we circle up, we give everyone a choice to have a voice. Everyone's valued within that, and that crew stays consistent. So even if the adult needs to change for any reason, the crew is a crew, and they develop their own crew name. They choose their own maybe crew charity that they're going to work around together. They choose their own crew read. So Andy spoke about in that film how we have a shared read that is often just a fun book that will support what their learning is, rather than a high cognitive ability book. And so that will be a read that everyone in that crew shares. So they have some real common things then that they've all shared together. And we don't do outward bounds with every student every year. So we might take them for a walk to the local, the most local seaside, and walk around together and experiences together to allow them to develop what crew is, and how some kids really love certain things and some kids really don't like certain things, and actually we can liken that to school. Some kids absolutely love school, some kids really struggle with school, and we can circle up and we can talk about why that is, and know that not everybody is amazing at everything, and actually some people struggle, but in the same way we'd celebrate when people are really successful in things, and that really supports them, that diversity within a crew.
Something that was really interesting. Something that, I mean, immediately jumped out. I've always been a big fan of the sort of the outdoor ed type school trip, and I just think that clever thing of flipping it so this is the start of the year rather than the end of the year, and then seeing it as an integrated part of your provision for everyone, and then drawing upon that, because yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? You think, oh gosh, people show different things, but I think making that an active integrated part of your provision and character development, and how you then link back to the sort of more formal conventional curriculum, I think is really interesting. And I'm also really taken by, I've heard a few bits, but I've never heard the specific justification of crew as in you have to participate and take part. And I think that's just a really nice way of framing that. I like that it's not simply crew as in a collective. It's a crew as in you've got a role and you've got to be responsible. So yeah, I mean, those two things that stood out particularly for me. Really good. Thank you.
Thanks,
I agree
James.
with you, James. Actually, building on what James just said there, I hadn't really appreciated that either. That analogy of it's quite nice to be a passenger sometimes, but when you're a passenger, someone else is doing the work to make it nice for you. When you're part of crew, you're doing the work. That, like, I've heard crew talked about so many times, but that just made my light go on. I was like, oh, of course, that's what we're talking about here. And as you were talking there, Claira, I was just thinking there are clearly some active ingredients of this. So the things that you kind of have to do, and there are different ways you could do them and get the same benefit maybe. And I guess that would be quite interesting to explore at some point. What are the active ingredients, the things that make crew work? And because that might help people to be able to see that you could do it, but you don't have to necessarily do the same thing, but you have to have the same active ingredients. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talk a lot about the Kurt Hart quote, there's more in us than we know, and actually if only we were made to see it, we'd realise how amazing we are. I've completely not followed that quote to the letter, but that's the basic meaning behind what he says. And actually, we talk a lot about that. If we can reflect on what the power of crew, and we reflect on in our circles, actually whatever activity we've done, if we can circle up and talk about praises, wonders, appreciate those that have gone out of the comfort zone maybe, or make apologies if people chose to be bystanders, then we can empower crew to actually see that there is more in us than we know, and we really can celebrate those small wins for certain students. I think for me, one thing that we've not really touched on when we've talked about crew that's really pivotal is that parents feel part of crew. So when parents leave in year 11 or year 6 from a school, they feel the grief in the same way the kids do, because they are losing that connection with their crutch, I suppose, around school. Because they have one person that does all the talking to them, unless it gets really serious about whatever we're doing. So in our XP schools, we run something called Narrative for Success, which is like an underlying sort of leadership model, I suppose, where we flip Maslow's hierarchy of needs on its head, and we say, actually, children have got to be safe, first and foremost. If they're safe, then they've got to be engaged. And if they've got barriers, then we need to remove those barriers. Then actually, if those two things are all right, then we need to be sure they're attending. And if they're not attending, then actually that's going to have the most impact. So let's get them attending. And if they're not attending, then it must be habits of work and learning that are the concern. And so we remove barriers at each level, but we start with safety. Is everyone feeling safe where they are right now? And if they're feeling safe, then actually we can expect them to try anything that we put in front of them. Let's remove those barriers. So if we're using technology, let's ensure that we're removing any financial barriers around technology, and every kid who needs technology gets technology. So we've been very clever with our budget over the years, to the point where we can offer Outward Bound completely free. So that enables us to do that on first day back without it being any dramas around getting money in and that sort of thing. But it also enables everyone to take part, and it removes any stigmatism around engagement within that. And actually, if we go forwards and backwards when there's medical concerns or SEN concerns, that may be a barrier about how we can make that happen. And occasionally, we've got one little boy who is joining us in September who's got cystic fibrosis, he's also diabetic, lots and lots of medical needs going on there. We have enabled him to have an Outward Bound experience with his crew, but not the full Outward Bound experience because of the implications of stagnant water and all the rest of it. The risks there are too much, but he won't just not take part. We'll find, or we're coming up with something quite local to home, but that we can do with his crew as an additional, so that the barriers there are removed and he does feel part of crew. And that's, we work through that hierarchy of needs upside down in some respects. But actually, crew leader then is the gatekeeper to all those conversations initially. And we talk about how actually there's a scale within safety. The majority of our kids feel great and feel safe all the time. A small number of our kids feel okay, but, and there's always that but there with okay, that there might be something else that we need to do better. And then there's some kids that actually their life isn't great and has fell to pieces previously or is falling to pieces. And that's when then leaders and senior leaders become involved in that family's life, not before then. So that's where DSL comes involved. And that's not dissimilar to any school across the country, but because of the language around that, parents feel really confident with opening up to crew leader and know that that crew leader actually is part of their family. So they're invited for tea and invited for all sorts. They don't always follow it through, obviously, because of our own safeguarding protocols. But parents really do want them to be part of their family, and we'll talk to them like the sister or the brother as a mum. And so that's really lovely that encompasses then what crew is about, and it's a full family around the child, including the school family and home family, and not just us and them. And that's really helpful.
And I suppose as a result, you can flip Maslow up, because you'll know that about the children. You'll know who their needs can be addressed instantly, because you're seeing them daily. You're having that quality time check-in, which if you are 1 to 35, that can be, you know, what we call the grey children in the middle that you can overlook. And sadly, they could be the ones that would, and I think they're the ones almost that benefit the most from crew, because you always know either ends of the scale, don't you?
Yeah.
I think what I really like, it's like you were saying, James, about the residential. What we did, we took our year 5s on a residential, and they've been a very disparate year group, very changed, and actually we've booked them an overnighter at the start of September next year to really reset them for the year 6. So it's interesting you say about the value of that. I think what I might do is take forward, I'm certain I'll take forward about that team, that crew, and hopefully that will reset them for their year 6 year.
Yeah, I think having purposeful debriefs as well throughout the year allows them to then just reflect on, why did we do that? What were you feeling at that point? How's that similar to what we're feeling now? And I know our year 6 colleagues in the primary sector talk a lot about how actually crew gets them through that last push, because there are some kids when it gets to that last point of coming up to May that they are feeling it and they're struggling with particularly the reading paper and how challenging that can be for a large portion of our students. So crew gets them through and crew supports them, and so they'll do the crew breakfast and everything. Nothing is unusual with what we do day in, day out, but the crew gives us the vehicle to allow them to all feel part of it together, and I think that's what makes that really successful. I'm going to move on because I'm conscious of the time and I want you to see a little bit more. But like I say, do interject if you choose. So the next video, again, is only 4 or 5 minutes. This shares beautiful work in our community and sets the scene a little bit around the way that our student work leaves a legacy and is empowering beyond just school. And it also shows a little bit of primary and a little bit of secondary. And then afterwards, I'll explain our curriculum a little bit more and how then that allows our students to own their learning and also have that motivation to want to link disciplines and understand a little bit deeper.
XP Trust is a family of schools that deeply connects with and makes a positive difference to the communities we serve. Our students work hard to craft high-quality products that have an impact on the world around them. Their work lives in the heart of our communities: hospitals, parks, museums, railway stations and beyond. The beautiful work isn't just contained within the classroom walls. So, let's head out and see just a few examples of our students' activism for ourselves. Here we are in Sir Nigel Gresley Square in the middle of Doncaster Town Centre, and this is the newly installed plaque that was paid for and funded for by the XP and XP East School students and friends, and it commemorates the fact that near to this site suffragettes actually stood on boxes and spoke about votes for women. And it's an extraordinary memorial, an extraordinary piece of work. And I'm just so proud that it's here. As a child growing up in Doncaster, I was told about the fact that these women came and spoke, and after 100 years and more, to see this here in place is amazing. And another wonderful thing that happened was on the day we unveiled this, Sarah Gavron, the director of the Film Suffragette, happened to be on a visit to XP School and came here and was actually here at the unveiling.
Hi, I'm Sarah Gavron and I'm the director of Suffragette, the film, and it's brilliant that I'm here today because I came to visit XP School because I was interested in the way that they were modelling a new kind of education which looks fantastic. And coincidentally it turned out that the Year 9s had in Year 8 done this incredible project where they'd raise money and they'd research suffragettes and who were from Doncaster like Lillian Lenton, and they'd raise money to create a plaque that is behind us. So I'm delighted to be here on the occasion of this plaque being unveiled with all the young people here who worked so hard on their project and spoke so eloquently about the work they'd done.
We've worked with XP for a long time now, and we like to encourage local schools to display their work, of which obviously you provided a good chunk of down the months and recent years. So we've got a lot of space that can be utilised, and we're not just a shopping centre, we're a central part of the local community in essence. Well, I like XP because they basically do things differently. There's a whole piece to talk about education and whether a child is academic or whether they're more practical minded, and this is not something you see every day of every week in every shopping centre. So the involvement for us with the local school is incredibly important because it's different. It's not you must do this, this and this. It's thinking outside the box and it's doing things differently, which we really like. I think when you're engaging local people using their artwork and their work, it just ties things together really nicely.
You actually invited us to paint an elephant?
Yes, we did. And it's just down there, sat outside Elephant Castle, and the kids did a great job.
That was the kids at Plumber, wasn't it?
It was indeed, yes. And again, they did great piece of work on a project that a school would not normally probably undertake. And
not every day.
No. It's a 7-foot elephant. Decorate that, kids. But they did a great job talking about again the town of Doncaster, what it means to them, the great places there are to visit. So they did a great job, as you'll see shortly.
And here we are at the newly opened Dagenham Museum and Art Gallery, and I'm delighted to say that there are examples of XP work here in the building. Our books, How We XP, and student books that have been published and written by our students are here as part of the exhibition about Doncaster, and also a wonderful piece about books from Norton Junior School. So it's wonderful too that our students' work is part of this amazing collection. Here is Cast, our amazing theatre that only opened a few years ago, and with the help of Right Up Our Street we were able to hold the premiere here for the students of XP and XP East of their beautiful film Should I Stay or Should I Go? And it was an amazing evening, an amazing occasion, and the film is available still to watch online. The list goes on and on. As our schools continue to grow, their activism reaches further into the community, a community that starts with Crewe and expands far beyond the reaches of the school itself. We are our town. Our town is us.
So expeditions at XP across our schools, so primary all the way through, are very cross-curricular, and as I said earlier on, we are like a secondary school for primary school for big kids, secondary school model, but in a primary school way at the secondaries. And so we do a lot of cross-curricular learning. It's mapped against national curriculum to allow that rigour, so it's not in the same way as project-based learning can be banded around. And actually recently we had an inspection that's not yet been published, but our students talked about how so talk to me about these products was what they were asked, and how you know you learn more through creating these products. And one of our Year 9 students said, well, I actually get an emotional connection with my learning, and because we have presentations of learning where we talk at the bottom of the stairs to lots of VIPs and a big audience, and because we are immersed in that learning, and my work is published in these books, I know then I can remember that learning and build on it. And so actually that blew people's minds in terms of the way they connected with learning from previous expeditions, and how that then supported them to know and remember more. I think we talk to our kids a lot about how there are 3 themes to their learning. Climate emergency, because that's really important right now. Diversity and belonging, because we're all different and we celebrate that. And social activism, and how actually when we're in that modern world, we need to be able to make a stand if something's not right. And so then that goes back to what we do in Crew when we make stands around things, because it allows students to understand how actually they can make a stand against things that are happening beyond their locality, wider, nationally, locally, and within community, and really develop that civic pride and that pride of where they come from and what they contribute to. And also within expeditions, field work and experts are really important. So we engage with experts, and they come in and they share from their field of work the learning that they needed to be in their current job roles, or they will share their knowledge of that job role. So a recent example of that we've just recently had in the local migrant centre, working with students. We also had some Ukrainian refugees and the company in Doncaster that are supporting Ukrainian refugees, and they talked about their experiences firsthand to allow students to truly empathise with that piece of work around migration, and link that then to their history knowledge around migration, their geography knowledge around migration and why people move from certain places around the world, but also understand the personal development needs around people who are moving into our country. So that was really supportive in terms of experts and using them in a purposeful way.